I am going to jump into the first question. First, can you describe your role as an insect collector and what a day doing your job looks like?
I am an assistant in the insect collection here at the Illinois Natural History Survey. I'm also a lab assistant for the aquatic entomologist here. The insect collection is located in the Natural Resources Building, so it's on 6th and Peabody. Basically, my job is to prepare specimens. So if a researcher or like a grad student, undergraduate, there was a study done and they have all these dead bugs, basically, they bring them to the collection. And then I'm one of those people that would either pin it or put it in a vial of alcohol. Usually we use ethyl alcohol, or it's mounted on a microscope slide. And we do labels. We have to thoroughly label everything, so we know like when it was collected and where and what date, by who is really important. And then after that is all prepared, then I'm also one of those people that can digitize them. So I database them. We just enter all of that information on the computer so that people can access it and collect that data. I also need to have a pretty simple understanding of the taxonomy of like what orders of insects. It's a lot of learning on the job, but that makes it fun and every day can be different. And we do go collecting. It's really fun because it's usually like days at a time and we get to stay in, a hotel or camp. Collecting, we usually do like, I've done sweep nets to catch bees. We also do just hand picking, like with forceps, and then you just like stick them straight into a vial to look at later. Or since I help with aquatic entomology, we also do like dip netting. So like a big net in the bottom of a stream or a river. And then we kind of pour all of that into a pan and then pick them out like that. So a lot of people do them different ways. You can do malaise traps or funnel traps. Yeah, a lot of different things. We should be going out and collecting soon though, since it's getting warm outside. So that'll be more exciting. We work with state agencies. I've done some work for the Illinois Department of Transportation around Chicago, trying to find the rusty-patched bumblebee. It's federally endangered and we have found it up there before, so that's really cool. And we also do some outreach. So I've done some outreach at like park districts. I've done a bio blitz where you like get together with all these different biologists and we kind of collect every kind of organism that we can find over a certain period of time, like a whole 24 hours, and then we log all of it and it's really cool. So yeah.
Our next question for you is, from our perspective, there seems to be a fair number of people who view insects as scary or gross, and clearly the average person does not contemplate on a daily basis how much humans are constantly relating to insects. So when did you know that you wanted to work with this category of the non-human?
When I was about 9 to 12, I started spending the summers in Wisconsin, in central Wisconsin with my grandparents. And my grandmother, she used to do some volunteer work like at Lincoln Park Zoo and stuff when they lived in Chicago. And over one summer, I remember she told me that she had a bunch of gypsy moth caterpillars that were eating all of her oak trees. And she was like, okay, well, we're going to pick all of them off and like kill them because they're killing my trees and I don't want them to do that. I was like, okay. We would get like a big bucket and fill it with soapy water and then go like during sunset and go and try to pick as many gypsy moth caterpillars that we could like off of her tree because they're an invasive species and they kill oak trees basically, and she didn't want that to happen to hers. So that was my first introduction to really like invasive organisms and strategic entomology kind of thing. And even as a 9-year-old, I didn't think of it as that. I was just like, okay, we're just picking bugs. But it always like stuck with me. And then as I got older, I always really loved science, and especially environmental science and just like general biology. And I met like my best friend from high school and my college roommate. They loved insects and they had like their own mini collection of like little vials of these like gorgeous beetles from all over the world. And that's when I really started to get into it and like start reading books about bugs and, watching like David Attenborough kind of stuff. And then I knew I really wanted to work with insects, particularly bees, which I haven't done that much work with bees specifically in my career so far, but hopefully soon. So I did a lot of work with like pinning bees and prairie restoration and taking trips to meet with different, like the Nature Conservancy and stuff. So that's how I kind of got my foot in the door. And then John introduced me to Tommy, who's the insect collection manager here. And then I just started volunteering. And even after I graduated, I stayed on as a volunteer. And finally, they were like, "You're here all the time. Do you want us to pay you?" So I was like, "Yeah, that would be great." And then I've worked here ever since. And then the aquatic entomology opportunity popped up. And then I took that one because I didn't want to be a barista anymore if I could work here full time.
How have your experiences with insects influenced your perception of human and non-human relationships? Are they more or less intertwined than you originally thought?
Yeah, so I don't, relating to insects specifically, I don't really relate to them like how I would relate to like my dog, because it's an insect, right? So like there are like bees and ants that have like a caste system, so that is similar to like our society as humans, how they operate. But humans have like an ego and awareness that insects don't, so that just makes us a little more complicated. But insects are the most diverse group of organisms on the planet, so they make up about like 80% of the world's known species on the planet, which is pretty crazy. And they interact with us in so many ways that you wouldn't really think of like every day. So they pollinate our food. That's a huge one. About a third of our food comes from pollinated plants that bees pollinate. They eat detritus material, so like rotting wood and animals and us, and they help kind of carry along the carbon cycle on the planet. And they also serve as like season markers. So like in phenology, like the study of seasons. For me personally, I see like in March, I'll see mining bees outside. So they're the bees that like dig little holes in the soil. And that's when I know like, oh, okay, spring is coming. So like if they're out, then that means it's getting warmer. And then we have like cicadas in mid to late summer. So I associate summer with like the chirping, like hum of cicadas. Like that's what I think of. And then also there's a family of stoneflies that they're called Allicapnia, and they come out in the middle of January. So they're a winter stonefly. So that it's like the dead of winter when those guys are outside. So there's that kind of aspect to it that most people don't pay attention to.
Next question kind of talks about this as well, but when you enter an environment where you are working with insects, we assume you take on a different mindset than you would in everyday life. How do insects as a non-human species impact your coexistence with companion species inside and outside of your work?
I think working with insects makes me more sensitive to like the intricate balance of organisms and resources that our planet has. I find myself being more like attentive to detail ever since I started working with bugs. Like I'll be out on a walk and I'll hear them or I'll see them, and people will be like, "How the hell did you see that?" And I was like, "I don't know. It's just, it's my life now." But yeah, it definitely makes me pay attention to the little things in life. I'm more aware of how others observe insects as well. Like I have a neighbor, and every year she has like this awesome back deck, and it's all wooden. And every year she has so many carpenter bees, and she's out there with like the electric like zapper thing, like trying to kill them and spraying them with poison. And I always just like want to be like, no, please stop, don't do that. I do notice that like in our backyard and like cleaning up your yard too early is also detrimental to insects, because a lot of them like to live in like stems of the plants that you had in your backyard. So all these little things that the average person doesn't know, and that's not really their fault. But yes, I do notice all of those things for sure.
This question talks about if you could describe a specific moment while working with insects that allowed you to let go of humanity as a specialized category.
So one that really like made me so sad. I used to do prairie restoration here on campus, and we were trying to get rid of all of the invasive plant species. They're very weedy and they're aggressive, and they kind of take over. Like if you have a field and you're trying to restore it to native prairie, then all of these bad plants kind of take over. So we were trying to get rid of those. But we would spray all these plants to try to kill them, because pulling them all by hand would take years. And one day I was out there working and I had my spray, backpack on, and I was spraying the plants. And this beautiful big fat bumblebee, like I didn't notice that it was there, and I had accidentally sprayed it while I was on one of these plants. And then it just kind of like fell and died. And I felt so sick to my stomach. And I think I actually cried. I think I was the only one out there, so I didn't feel bad about crying. But it made me kind of think like, okay, what am I doing here? Yes, prairie restoration is great, but I don't know if this necessarily aligns with my values. And it was kind of one of those things where I had to take a seat and be like, are humans really superior? Because I'm over here spraying all these chemicals, and God knows how many bugs I'm killing when I'm actually trying to do work to save them. So it just seemed a little backwards to me. And I didn't work that job for too much longer because of that. I didn't agree with it. And yeah, I realized at that point that I didn't want to be in the field of entomology, where it's like, how much can we poison this insect until it dies? Like I wanted to be part of entomology that just kind of like helps to save all of them. So then I kind of put more of my energy into like the insect collection side, where we gather insects, and I know they're all dead, and like we kill them, but we do it for studies. And then those same specimens can be used by other scientists all over the world. And we kind of have this museum of specimens that some have been collected in like the 1800s, and we get to compare today's insects to those, and how abundant they were and if they're still around or not. So I wanted to kind of focus on that stuff more. So that was definitely an experience where I was like, wow, humans are the worst. Yeah.
Oftentimes in class, we debated like the meaning of language as like a way to differentiate humans from non-human species. So applying your understanding of the intricate communication that happens between insects, do you think language is what separates humans from other species?
I don't think that it's language necessarily, because insects do have their own kind of language. But they use chemical signaling and like body language. So a good example is like honeybees do the waggle dance to show the other honeybees like where the pollen and nectar is coming from, so that they can go find it and bring it back to the hive. But of course, they're not like vocally speaking to each other. But I think what separates us is, like I said before, like our ego as humans and our awareness and our greed, I guess, as humans. Because insects can live in perfect harmony with their surroundings and other organisms, but we just can't seem to do that.
moving forward, do you have any recommendations on how we as humans can be more conscious and respectful of our co-history with insects?
Yeah, so one thing, when I was an undergraduate here at U of I took a class and we talked a lot about nature as like a social construct and how we are kind of brought up thinking about it as like a separate thing. Like we are not necessarily part of nature or like, you know, in the wild, but everything is connected and everything that we do affects the whole globe. And I think that like some easy ways are to get involved in your community, or like with my neighbor who tries to poison her bees, like she could use maybe some more natural remedies or, you know, strategies to ward them off if they're becoming a nuisance. I also think that reading some books on how native people interact with nature and their knowledge of, you know, our ecosystems would really help us kind of reverse all the damage that we've done. But another good book is Braiding Sweetgrass, I think is what it's called. It's also just very important to integrate native people's knowledge of, you know, the ecosystem and the environment, because they were doing a pretty good job before all of us came over here and kind of ruined it for everyone. So there's definitely a way to do it, and I think that they know what's best. So that would be a good book too. But overall, I myself try to take more time to be outside and enjoy nature, even if it's just being among the trees makes you a happier person anyway. And maybe going out and looking for bugs with friends would be a fun thing to do if you're bored. But yeah, just things like that. Yeah, for sure.